are starting all over again. We're starting from Parshat Breshit, and we are zooming into this verse. This is chapter 1, verses 26 through 27. And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. And God created man in his image. In the image of God he created him, male and female he created them." We have a second source, which is in Parshat Noach, in chapter 9, verse 6, "Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God he made man." And finally, from Pirkei Avot in the 3rd chapter, Mishnah 14, this is a quote from Rabbi Akiva. He would say, "Beloved is man, for he was created in the image. An even greater love is that it was made known to him that he was created in the image, as it is said, for in the image of God he made man." Beloved are Israel, for they are called children to the omnipresent. Beloved are Israel, for a precious vessel was given to them through which the world was created. Okay. Now, if you were standing before a mirror that reflects not your face, but your conscience, would you see the image of God looking back at you? Rabbi Akiva said, "Beloved is man, for he was created in the image." The Tosot Yom Tov on the Mishnah that we read teaches that this is not specifically a Jewish privilege, it's a human destiny. Every human being carries that divine image, and therefore bears a sacred obligation to do the will of his Creator. Modern culture praises the idea of being yourself, but it rarely asks which self deserves to be expressed. The Torah's opening chapters present a vision of humanity not as a random accident. Again, what was the instrument of creation? How were we created? We were created b'tselem Elokim, in the divine image. And obviously, we would need to spend time on understanding precisely what that is, because we know that Hashem does not have any form, any physical or corporeal form. So, what exactly the Tselem Elokim is a larger discussion. But we know that somehow we have Hashem's imprimatur on us. Now, to live without the awareness of having been created b'tselem Elokim is to mistake freedom for meaninglessness. Because when it comes to being ourselves, which aspect of ourselves needs to really be amplified? Rabbi Akiva's words come to restore that awareness, reminding humanity that dignity and obligation, particularly our obligations towards God, are inseparable from each other. So we have Rashi on that Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, and he says, "Chavivin Adam, beloved is man, and therefore it is incumbent upon him to do the Creator's will." You'd think that if we were created in the divine image, what that means is we're the best. And we should just celebrate this fact. We can get very excited about this. We're sitting on top of the world. But being created in God's image is not a compliment. It's a calling. To be created B'Tselem Elokim means to be charged with the responsibility of representing divine morality in the world. And when we have the commentary of the Tosfot Yom Tov on that Mishnah, he gives us a very important revelation. He emphasizes that Rabbi Akiva'S statement applies to all humanity. And if you remember what we cited over there, was Genesis chapter 9, verse 6, that's a verse that's addressed to the B'nai Noach, to the descendants of Noah. So by choosing or by highlighting this verse, Rabbi Akiva is signaling to us that Tselem Elokim, the divine image, is a universal condition of mankind. It's not a covenantal privilege. And he quotes the Rambam, it's a Rambam that we've seen many times, in Hilchot Melachim, chapter 8, halacha 10. It says the following: Moses commanded by divine word to compel all of the inhabitants of the world to accept the 7 Noahide laws. And we know that whoever accepts them, because God commanded them through Moses, is of the righteous of the nations, the Chasidei Umot HaOlam, and has a share in the world to come. For Tosfot Yom Tov, Rabbi Akiva's teaching is the moral counterpart to this legal principle. We've often talked about this, that you'll have laws, do's and don'ts, that the Torah lays down for us, but there's also an entire universe of moral and character development. Okay? So what Rabbi Akiva is saying here is let's say the moral counterbalance of the legal aspect. Now, just on the side, this opinion of Rambam's, that Moshe Rabbeinu, that Moses was commanded to compel the inhabitants of the world to accept the 7 Noahide laws, is an opinion held specifically and only by the Rambam. It's what we call in Torah scholarship a das yachid. It's a unique opinion. It doesn't mean that it's dismissed out of hand. This is the Rambam talking. But there's something interesting about it. Compulsion means quite literally compulsion, like physically. You know, the same way the government can force us to do things because it has a specific amount of power and can back that up with a certain credible threat of punishment. Now, that's sort of starting us off on a negative sounding foot, as it were. But the Tosfot Yom Tov takes us in a completely different direction. Listen to this. If the commandment is to compel, and that would be permitted in a Torah framework, says the Tosfot Yom Tov, how much more must persuasion through words and through love be employed to awaken the hearts of all human beings to their divine origin? So he's reading the Mishnah's phrase, Chavivin Adam, beloved is man, as a call to draw all of humanity towards their Creator. showing them their worth as beings who were created B'Tselem Elokim. Now, we have two different phrases in this mission. We have Tselem, which simply means image, and then Tselem Elokim is the image of God. And the Tosfot Yom Tov makes a distinction. Tselem is like the intellectual and moral faculty of human beings, their capacity for understanding and free choice. Tselem Elokim is that capacity when it has been fulfilled, when it's been brought to its ultimate purpose, meaning that the capacity for the intellectual capacity is leading the person to the knowledge and service of Hashem. So every person is created B'Tselem, meaning to say that they possess this divine potential, but only the person who acts from conscience, because God commanded it, truly manifests being created B'Tselem Elokim. Rabbi Akiva here is addressing the entire human race. Those who bear the divine form but have yet to actualize its likeness. Right? The verse from Genesis 9:6, "For in the image of God he made man," describes the intended goal of humanity, that reason should lead to the knowledge of God. And when that knowledge is unrealized, the image remains potential. It's sacred, because of course this is a creation of Hashem, but it's incomplete. Now, I'll tell you something else that's interesting about the Tosfot Yom Tov. He was writing in the early 1600s, during the time of global exploration. And in the most striking historical notes ever written by a rabbinic commentator, he records the following. The King of England sent a man named Sir Francis Drake, who circled the entire world and brought back with him a certain plant called batata. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Which had not been known previously in Europe. And it shows the wisdom and intelligence of man, for in the image of God he made man. He's citing Sir Francis Drake, the English explorer. Now the batata, of course, is the potato. The potato symbolized to the Tosfot Yom Tov not indulgence, but intellect. Even the discovery of a new food source, benefit to humanity, increasing the sustenance of mankind, reveals to the Tosfot Yom Tov the wisdom that Hashem places in the human mind. That kind of innovation, he writes, is a living testimony that for in the image of God he made man. Now, he's not talking here specifically about Sheva Mitzvot B'nei Noach. To him, Sir Francis Drake's voyages were not acts of conquest. They were curiosity. Right? Here we have people going out all over the world to see what's there, to explore it, to discover it. But it's curiosity that is sanctified. It's human ingenuity, extending the reach of divine wisdom into the physical world for the benefit of humanity, in the expansion of knowledge and nourishment. He saw the Tosfot Yom Tov, saw a reflection of the Creator, who, as Isaiah says in chapter 45, verse 18, formed the earth to be inhabited. Now, centuries later, another Englishman by the name of Edward Jenner fulfilled the same kind of vision, but from a different angle. Jenner, who lived long after the Tosfot Yom Tov, discovered vaccination and saved millions of lives. And these are separated by time, of course. The explorer, Sir Francis Drake, and the healer, Edward Jenner. But both demonstrate how intellect and compassion, guided by conscience, reveals Tselem Elokim in action. So Drake and Jenner become emblematic of two dimensions of divine likeness: the intellect that explores, expanding the boundaries of creation, and the compassion that heals, preserving the sanctity of life. And we don't mention only Sir Francis Drake and Edward Jenner, to limit the amount of amazing people who have done these kinds of things. But both enact humanity's partnership with God in sustaining and ennobling the world. What's interesting, kind of an interesting side note, is that in later editions of the Tosfot Yom Tov, editors put Edward Jenner's name in there, even though the Tosfot Yom Tov hadn't, he wasn't alive when the smallpox vaccine was formulated. We're talking about humanity's partnership with God in sustaining and ennobling the world. To live b'Tselem Elokim means to bear witness to God through reason and through justice and reverence. When B'nai Noach act justly, when they guard life, when they acknowledge Hashem's sovereignty, they transform potential into the divine image. They fulfill the Tachlis Habriya, the whole purpose of creation, that humankind should come to know God through conscience and through wisdom. And today, we have separate countries with separate flags, and they keep trying to create, institutions to unite us, which I think fail usually in every respect. But you can imagine a world that is united by values. The Tosfot Yom Tov adds that Chaviv Adam Shenivra B'Tselem, that beloved is man who was created B'Tselem, also functions as a gentle rebuke. Because we are created in God's image, we are accountable to that image. We have to fulfill that image. To degrade life, to harm conscience, to deny moral truth is to deface that likeness, that image. But divine love endures. We see in that Mishnah that Israel was granted a specific role amongst humanity, being called Banim L'Makom, right? Children of the Omnipresent, and receiving the Kli Chemda, which is the Torah, the beloved vessel. But that was already preceded. That was already preceded by the first love, which was already universal, which is beloved is man. And that's the love that is the bridge that joins all of creation to its creator. So we see that in Breshit, in the first chapter in Genesis, first Parsha, the Torah begins not with a nation, not with a specific group of people, but with humanity as a whole. Before covenant, there was conscience. Before Sinai, there was Tselem Elokim. Derech Eretz Kadma LaTorah. A world of refinement, of spiritual refinement, is necessary as a vessel to hold the Kli Chemda, the beloved vessel that Torah is. So to live as God's image is to think with clarity, is to choose with reverence, and to act with compassion. Every time a person does good, because it is Hashem's will, he fulfills the very reason that Adam was formed in the first place. This is the first Torah. This is the Torah of humanity. From the voyager who mapped the unknown, to the healer who cured the incurable, from the potato that fed nations, to the moral act that preserves life, all reflect the Creator who brings order out of chaos and light out of darkness. So we should all be blessed to remember that the image of God is not a mystery to be solved, but a likeness to be lived.